Are we entering a new era of TV measurement? Is a new common currency on the way? And what's on the minds of assignment editors, those stalwarts of the TV newsroom whose crucial work can sometimes seem invisible? I'm Michael Depp, editor of TVNewsCheck, and this is Talking TV, the podcast that brings you smart conversations about the business of broadcasting. Today, two of our writers are joining me for that conversation, Paige Albiniak and Michael Stahl, and I'll be right back with them. Welcome, Paige Albiniak and Michael Stahl. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Paige, let's start with you. You've got a story coming out next Monday on TVNewsCheck looking at what you describe as a very eventful month in a rapidly evolving world of TV measurement. Just why was February so important?
So I'm going to back up just a tiny bit and say, just to sort of illustrate how I'm thinking about the world of TV measurement right now, which is it's sort of an interesting space because on one hand, you've got a lot of complaining about Nielsen. And if you've read the headlines, you think TV measurement is a disaster and nothing is getting measured. But if you look at what NBCUniversal did this month, they had the Super Bowl and the Olympics for the first time ever on their networks in the same month. They measured the linear numbers, they measured the streaming numbers. They also provided very incremental data for advertisers. And they're very transparent about that. And they published all those numbers. In fact, they published them like every day and it was quite a lot. But so that's new. People haven't seen those kinds of numbers prior to this. Then the piece that's also happening is that Nielsen finally integrated broadband only homes into its local universe panels, samples, and they had said they were going to do that since last April. They kept postponing it, and then they finally did it. So, and then there's some issue between what Nielsen says the universe is in terms of how many broadband only homes there actually are versus what some local station analysts are saying.
And this, of course, is the introduction of BBO homes has been pushed off and pushed off and pushed off. So finally, it's arrived. Yeah. If we go back to NBCU, they partnered with ISpot.tv in a kind of test and learn program, which was able, as you said, to provide a lot more granular incremental viewer data than has been previously available. What kind of data are we talking about here?
It's a lot of streaming data. It's a lot of ad impression data. So what it means is that you can track an ad through the streaming universe and tell advertisers sort of exactly how many impressions you got against it. And then also it's done very quickly. So advertisers can respond to that information within probably faster than 24 hours. And, Kelly Carrion made the point when I talked to her that in linear ratings, you have to wait, up to 2 weeks. So if you're in the Olympics and you want to be putting an ad against a gold medal win, you have the opportunity to do that.
Okay, so the streaming and linear overlap is kind of the key thing with the NBCU iSpot partnership. So are they claiming to have a kind of holistic cross-screen visibility of viewer behavior in place?
I mean, I would not say it is a one number type thing. It is, you can see what the linear numbers are, and really NBC gave the Nielsen numbers, and you can see what the streaming numbers are via iSpot, or Nielsen, both those were given, but it's not a one number. It's not like this piece of content did this number across all platforms. That hasn't been seen yet. And, Nielsen is saying they will have something like that with Nielsen One. I will say everyone I talked to is pretty skeptical about, not just from Nielsen, but from everybody, that there would ever be one single number.
Right. Now, you need to be a member to read your full story on TVNewsCheck. So I want to keep most of our powder dry on this, but just tell me, what are you looking at next as you are now following the measurement beat?
I think what I'm going to look at next is what I'm calling the end of demographics. And what I mean by that is some companies are looking at selling advertisers and clients ad bias based on guarantees that are not demographic based. And that's because demographics are kind of hard to ascertain. They aren't super accurate, especially if they're panel measured. So that's something I'm going to dig into a little bit more. And then another piece is this I know much less about, so I don't know when this will actually happen, but I'm going to do more research on this. It's called relative error. And it's basically about what happens when you have a small panel and you extrapolate those numbers across a large group. And as you extrapolate to larger groups, the error becomes bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that stands to reason. Okay, great. Michael Stahl, you are working on a piece for next month on the assignment desk and how things are changing there. Now, assignment editors are critical to the entire newsroom's workflow, but we don't see or hear from people doing this job very often. Your story is looking at how that job is changing, the priorities of the editors, the tools that they use. One of these tools, as we all well know, is the police scanner, which we think of as kind of central to the kind of murders and fires mainstay coverage of local news. But you're finding that that may be changing a bit. How?
Yeah, I mean, primarily, Twitter has taken over social media as a whole, but, Twitter, just with its sort of more real-time feed, has replaced a lot of what the police scanner used to mean for these people in the past. My sources, I'm about halfway through the reporting on this. My sources, tell me that they still use the police scanner, that it's still the old school, way to go. But there are some places where police scanners are encrypted, and they're not really, usable for news people. So, they turn to Twitter for a lot of their information.
Mm-hmm. Assignment editors are often the front line of defense against misinformation and disinformation as it batters the newsroom every day. How are they dealing with that problem and maybe getting more sophisticated in the ways in which they confront it?
Yeah, I think that I'm not sure how much more sophisticated they're getting necessarily, but I definitely think that there's a greater priority put on that. They are the front lines, as you said, and they just are, I think, being just extra diligent now going forward in terms of just following up on sources, checking in with multiple sources, making phone calls, doing all the grunt work, the legwork behind the scenes to help reporters out so that the reporters know that what they're going to run with is definitely viable and certainly true as well.
Mm-hmm. So they're definitely approaching everything. They can't take it at face value. All information they have to be skeptical about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. I even had sort of a humorous moment with one of my sources where he said, well, we don't just take what they say on Twitter at face value. And I jokingly said, I was like, you're kidding. And he was like, no. So they do, quite a bit of follow-up. And again, just a lot of what we might call sort of grunt work, but, really they've characterized themselves, if they get the opportunity to maybe pat themselves on the back a little bit. One characterized the assignment desk as sort of the central nervous system for the newsroom. One person said that they're the brain, and another said that they're the heart, or if we're going to do a car metaphor, they're kind of the engine, and because they're pumping so much information out into the newsroom for reporters, for producers, etc.
The assignment editor is always ready with a metaphor, I guess. You're finding that the assignment editor role is also becoming more collaborative than it used to be. How so?
Yeah, the impression that I'm getting so far is that in the past it was a very sort of like a central position, where they were, disseminating information out, and that's still the case to a degree, but they are getting a lot of information coming at them too from within the newsroom, from reporters, from producers, pitching them stories, and then they take that information and do again some of that grunt work that I was speaking about, and they have to have a good sense of what fills a newscast effectively. So I think that they're not just dishing out assignments, they're not just giving stories to reporters, they're also hearing pitches and letting them know whether or not that story from where they sit really has legs.
Yeah. So job, of course, is not getting any easier. And as newsrooms purport to move away from the kind of fires and crime mainstays, that means different kinds of stories, different way of conceptualizing the job, the way they think about everything that's coming across their transom. So it's be interesting to see what you find out as you talk to people who do not get spoken with enough in this business. So
yeah, I agree. I think it's just going to take a sort of a change of mindset. And I've already had at least one of my sources, pointedly say that, that we need to be more open-minded. We need to think more about stories that have a broader impact on communities as opposed to, so like a little fire broke out, across town
Right.
someplace, and it was extinguished, and that leads the news broadcast.
It's a hell of a lot easier to do those kind of stories in a way, which is why they get done. And so it's going to be interesting. Well, thank you, Michael. Looking forward to that story in early March. And Paige, keeping an eye out for yours on Monday. Thanks to both of you for being here, and to you for watching and listening. See you next time.
Thanks.
A new episode of Talking TV is available most Fridays on TVNewsCheck.com. You can also listen and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Spotify.